Hey everybody, it is Dak here from the Ad Boys, and today we're talking about the Fortis Colosseum. We currently have a blog post that already has had an extra update on it too, so we got a pretty good look at the possible Fortis Colosseum rewards and just what the content is going to look like. If you hadn't heard of the Fortis Colosseum at all, there is a small chance that you did hear about the Call trials, which were pitched like a year and a half ago. I did make a video about that. It's pretty much going to be what they pitched for the Call trials, but they're officially trying to add it to Varlamore. So as you can see here, there was already an update to the blog, so a couple of the things in the original blog post have been changed up a little bit. We are going to skip down to the beginning of the original blog post and then just go back to that update whenever it is needed. The Fortis Colosseum is Old School's third wave-based minigame, following the fiery footsteps of the Fight Caves and the Inferno. Like its predecessors, the Coliseum is a highly repeatable PvM encounter with a high skill ceiling and a steep difficulty curve. The later waves contain some of the toughest enemies Galenor has to offer, although the players who are new to combat can still try their hand at the earlier waves. There's a big focus on reactionary combat, the kind where you see enemies spawn in and quickly figure out how to manage them. Unlike the Fight Caves and Inferno though, the Coliseum invites you to make big decisions between each wave. So we are getting another like Fire Cave / Inferno, but it's going to run a little bit differently than the others do. First, we have the modifiers. The modifier system ensures that no two Coliseum runs will be the same. You might have seen similar systems in roguelikes and roguelites. I've played very few of these genres of video games, roguelikes and roguelites. To be honest, I had to look up what that was. At the end of each round, you'll be given an option to alter your gameplay experience in significant ways, buffing enemies, debuffing yourself, and even altering the terrain for a bigger challenge. The selection of modifiers you have to choose from is randomized, but beware, your choice will persist for the rest of the run. Don't bite off more than you can chew. So they did not add examples of exactly what those modifiers might be, but here is a screenshot of something from the previous Call trial blog post, giving a few examples of potential buffs you would give the enemies and whatnot. First, you have an immortal wraith will follow you through the arena. I don't know exactly what that means, but it seems sketchy. But then also you would have your own maximum health decreased by 30%, or the monsters getting lucky accuracy. So basically, at the end of each wave, they're going to give you a list of 3 random options that is going to make the rest of the run more difficult. These buffs and whatnot will last for the rest of your entire run. You have to either make your run more difficult after that, or just take the loot that you've already accumulated so far. So that is going to be the main thing about the Coliseum. It's going to be wave-based, but it's going to be a little bit more customizable, so each run is going to be a lot different. Next, we have Glory. Now, not everyone is in it for the heaping piles of gold that you can gain in battle. Some fighters want something even greater: Glory. Within the walls of the Fortis Colosseum, Glory is more than flowery language. It serves as a measurement of your prowess and comes with tangible benefits. You'll earn Glory every time that you complete a wave. How much depends on how much damage you took, how quickly you cleared the wave, and the number of errors that you made. Effectively, it's a reflection of how well you performed. This isn't a currency in the traditional sense. You can't farm it by repeating low-level waves over and over again. It is based solely on your performance, and the better you perform, the more glory that you'll accrue. As you gain more glory, you'll gain respect inside and outside of the Coliseum. The regulars will grant you access to untradeable rewards, including a swanky new cape slot upgrade, of course, while ordinary citizens all over Varlamore will recognize you and bestow rewards befitting your station. So that does mean that other things around Varlamore are going to be affected by your glory in the Coliseum, which is interesting. I imagine maybe like shops and stuff will be cheaper to buy items if you have larger glory, or just in general the NPCs will be nicer to you. Outside of the reward space, Glory also serves as a way to measure yourself against other players. Anyone can beat the Fight Caves and crow about it to their heart's content, but Glory will let you see which of your friends is really the better fighter. We know that talented PvMers have been competing against each other for time immemorial, or at least since 2013, and the system makes that official. That said, there's only so many ticks that you can save, hits that you can void, and enemies that can slay in a single run. To distinguish between the best of the best, we need to go beyond. We need to go endless mode, bro. Those who can't get enough of the Coliseum can choose to extend their run by running back every single wave with all of the modifiers that they've accumulated so far, plus new ones. This is sure to push your glory to new heights if you make it out alive. That seems pretty intense. The endless mode might be kind of wild. So basically, glory is just going to be like the score that you get during the run. The more glory you get, the better your loot is going to be, and it should affect some other things around Varlamore. Plus, the higher glory you have, the cooler you are amongst your friends. Of course, few people would put their life on the line without getting anything in return. For your time spent bloodletting in the Coliseum, you'll receive plenty of rewards. You earn rewards in 2 distinct ways. Firstly, after completing a wave, you'll have the chance to earn some unique tradable rewards, which you can choose to cash out next time you're offered the opportunity. Additionally, you can also unlock untradable rewards by meeting the requisite glory threshold. Let's get into what those rewards could be. First, we have the Glaive of Ralos. The Glaive of Ralos is a one-handed chargeable thrown weapon in a brand new weapon category, which bounces bounces back to you after each hit. Uncharged, you will throw it out and hit your enemy between 0 and 50% of your maximum hit, and the glaive will return to your hand. Infinite ammo sounds neat, but why only 50% damage? What gives? When charged, this groovy glaive will really come into its own. Its sharp edges will slice and dice for 2 hit splats. Each splat rolls its own accuracy and damage, where the damage rolls between 0 and 50% of your maximum hit. As fun as the thematics are, we've got a cherry on top to make sure that your time spent obtaining one of these bad boys is worthwhile. That is the special attack. For 50% spec energy, successful hits will drain the target's defense by 10% of their magic level. This means that when charged, you'll drain either 0, 10, or 20% of your target's magic level from their defense, depending on whether 0, 1, or 2 hits connects. In essence, a little bit like a ranged Dragon Warhammer, but with a twist. Also, your target's defense cannot be reduced by the Glaive of Ralos past 50% of its initial value, so you can't cut it more than in half. In general, yeah, they're looking to give us like a ranged Dragon Warhammer. If you use a spec and you hit 2 hit splats with it, you'll drop like 20% of your opponent's defense level based off the magic level, though. That can be interesting for a couple of reasons, which they kind of start to get into here. The Dragon Warhammer special attack reduces your target's defense by 30% of its current value, meaning each subsequent special attack drains a smaller number of defense levels than the hit before. The Glaive of Ralos drains your target's defense, but the drain is based on the magic level that the target has, meaning that subsequent hits should still reduce the defense by the same amount since the target's magic level likely hasn't changed. Against targets with high defense and low magic levels, the Dragon Warhammer still reigns supreme as your defense reduction spec weapon, but targets with high defense and high magic levels, the Glaive should prove to be a better option. And there's no talk about the Bando's Godsword in here either. In general, what's interesting about this is lowering based off your opponent's magic level means higher magic level on whatever you're fighting is going to make the glaive more valuable, and it is a ranged weapon, and that is the case for a twisted bow already. Twisted bow does a lot more damage if your opponent's magic level is high. It's all right to like switch into a bunch of melee gear, use a BGS spec, and then switch back to your range gear for the twisted bow, but it actually would be really convenient just to be wearing range gear and only bring this glaive as a special attack weapon and be able to lower the defense of your opponent very often. Our next unique is something you'll likely see in the wild a little more often, the Echo Crystal. These resonant rocks give off a nasty shockwave when struck, inflicting recoil damage on your attacker. That's great, but how do you equip them? We're thinking you'll be able to slot your crystals into existing boot slot items that need a little extra love. The current frontrunner is the Guardian Boots, although nothing is set in stone just yet. When charged with the Echo Crystal, the boots will inflict recoil damage on a 3x3 square around the wearer. This Echo Crystal idea is actually pretty cool. Being able to add recoil effect to more than just like your ring slot. Really all we have are Ring of Recoils, and then of course you can charge a Ring of Suffering with those Ring of Recoils. Just straight up adding to the Guardian Boots, and I think it makes sense on Guardian Boots too, because they're already supposed to be kind of a tank boot. Having your tank also be the guy who's doing recoil damage, that's actually a very interesting mechanic. Next, we have the Sunfire Fanatic Armor. They did already make some updates on this, so we'll read through what they put here, and then we'll just scroll up to that update. Sunfire Fanatic Armor is effectively Proselyte Armor, just with bigger numbers. That's the whole pitch. It's just going to be upgraded Proselyte Armor. Each piece of tradable Sunfire Fanatic set requires 60 prayer and 40 defense, and it'll be dropped individually, with each piece boasting a +2 prayer bonus over its Proselyte equivalent, and plus similar defensive stats to Rune Armor. And here is the updated look at what they said about the Sunfire Fanatic Armor. It was our attempt at keeping things simple, even though the later waves and eventually endless runs of Coliseum scale up to test even seasoned PVMers. We still want there to be something in it for people looking to get their feet wet in some earlier waves. Initially, we would propose this set as a direct upgrade to Proselyte, slightly better defensive stats, and +2 prayer bonus. By making this comparison to Proselyte, we saw a whole bunch of you come out and suggest we should reserve this space for the continuation of the Knight Temple questline, so we would like to propose an alternative. Before we dive into the specifics of this alternative, though, it is worth us pointing out that while we do have some exciting quests on the far horizon, we're not sure when we'd feasibly pick up the Temple Knight / Sea Slug storyline to fill this space, so we will keep the original proposal for Sunfire Fanatic Armor in our back pocket in case it feels preferable to stick to our guns. To change it up, we put together an alternative approach to the Sunfire Fanatic Armor that slots in as a range / prayer hybrid set, beating out Crystal Armor's prayer bonus with the stats equivalent to Red D'hide Armor, though coming in slightly below Proselyte in terms of raw prayer bonus. I completely understand where they were going for at first. The idea of just a little bit better prayer armor was like a very simple upgrade. You don't really have to think too much about where would that be useful. If there's any spot that you're using Proselyte to get a better prayer bonus, clearly the Sunfire Armor would have been better in that case. In this case, it still has a decent prayer bonus here, a little bit less prayer bonus than Proselyte, but it's specifically going to be better for range, which is still an interesting spot for the Sunfire armor. So it looks like we're going to be voting on the range and prayer hybrid for the Sunfire armor, but let me know in the comments section below which of the two sets you liked more. Did you like it when it was just straight up an upgrade to Proselyte, or do you like it better being not quite as much of an upgrade for the prayer bonus on Proselyte, but then also having some range bonus to it, being a good range armor while trying to save prayer points? Next, we have Sunfire Dust. You'll receive Sunfire Dust in bulk pretty regularly throughout your Coliseum runs. Similar to the Phantom Muswa's Ancient Essence, Sunfire Dust lets you change or otherwise interact with various other items, making it a constant source of profit for anybody taking on the challenge. You already know that you can use Sunfire Dust to charge the Glaive of Ralos, but you'll also be able to use it to craft Sunfire runes and charge Dizana's quiver. Let's talk about those in order. I will admit I missed that the Glaive of Ralos was charged with Sunfire Dust. I know they brought up that you would have to charge it, but now I realize what you charge it with. One of the things that you can use that Sunfire Dust for is making Sunfire runes. Sunfire runes are a brand new rune that take a slightly different approach to the Wrath rune formula. Assuming you have the requisite rune crafting level or the funds to pay somebody else to do it, you can obtain Sunfire runes by imbuing regular old fire runes with Sunfire Dust at the fire altar. Just like lava runes, Sunfire runes will count as fire runes when casting spells, but whenever you consume one, that spell gains a 10% minimum hit. Adding the extra minimum hit is a solid way to add some more DPS to spells without just straight up making the max hit go up. It still adds like overall good average damage to some fire spells. We hope that this boost will breathe new life into the fire spells offered in the standard spellbook, especially in conjunction with weapons like the Harmonized Nightmare Staff. I knew they were going to bring that up. Again, thinking that they added damage consistently help make these underpowered options more attractive. Bigger isn't always better, you know. There's a very similar effect raising the minimum or the maximum hit with a weapon. Basically, anytime that you accurately hit with your weapon, you roll between 0 and your max hit. So if you rolled between 0 and 50, you average like 25 damage or whatever. Increasing the minimum or the maximum hit in that case will increase your average damage. Next, we have the Dizana's quiver. This is another one that has a little bit of an update back at the top of the blog post, so we'll scroll up for that in just a second. Dizana's quiver is our proposal for a new best in slot range offering in the cape/back slot. After almost 6 years of Ava's Assembler occupying the top slot. Vorkath been in the game almost 6 years? Damn. Now, a best in slot item comes with very high expectations. In this case, you'll need to put on truly glorious performance in the Coliseum, make it through every wave, and you should have accumulated enough glory to take home this untradeable unique reward. Now, these stats are a little changed up, so we'll skip over that. So it looks cooler and it's a good bit stronger, but come on, we can't seriously expect you to start picking up your own arrows off the floor. Bring your quiver and your favorite Ava's device along to her workshop, and she will apply the same ammo saving effect to your cape. That's 80% for the assembler or 72 for an accumulator. I wonder what this is going to mean for that Masori Ava's Assembler like cosmetic that you get from Tombs of Amascut. Let's go ahead and look at the changes that they made to the quiver too. This is actually, they said a lot about the quiver overall here. But what good is a quiver that doesn't hold any arrows? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, dude. Great question. And you're right. A quiver that doesn't hold any ammunition is no quiver at all. With that in mind, we'd like to give the quiver the ability to hold at least 2 types of ammo, the exact number to be decided, and automatically select which one of those suits your current weapon. If you pop dragon arrows and ruby bolts into your quiver, the twisted bow will default using the arrows, while the Zarek crossbow would default to the bolts. This frees up your ammo slot for a blessing or Gommel's lucky penny, and might even free up inventory slots in case you were bringing that crossbow switch. That actually is pretty sweet. Like, one of the worst things about bringing a crossbow switch to try to use the crossbow special attack is that you also need to bring a bolt switch if you were using something that used arrows, so you actually need 2 inventory spaces for that. This does save some inv space. When charged, ammo fired from the quiver gains an additional +1 range strength, totaling the +4 that we showed off initially. This does 2 things. It alleviates a little concern about the toxic blowpipe being made disproportionately stronger compared to other range weapons when factoring in the quiver, and it tees us up to talk about charges. In other words, you will not get that +1 strength bonus unless you're using ammo from the quiver. So something like a toxic blowpipe, which has its own darts in it already, or the bow of Faradin, which doesn't need arrows at all, those will not get the +1 strength bonus from this. Now let's talk about charges. We'll open up with the headline. We'll be giving players the option to corrupt the quiver so that it never runs out of charges, similar to the bow of Ferdinand. With that said, we want to shed a little light on the initial proposal, why we're fond of charge systems, the role that they play in loot tables, and ultimately why we initially proposed the quiver as a non-corruptible charged item. As far back as the initial Tassakal Trials pitch, from which the Fortis Colosseum draws a lot of inspiration, we were keen on exploring the idea of a wave-based minigame with tangible element of monetary gain and risk versus reward decision-making, which is something players seemed pretty happy for us to explore both then and now. It's not controversial to say that difficult, active, and engaging content should be rewarding, yes, but how exactly do we make things rewarding? In some cases, we can use untradeable uniques, such as the quiver, to satisfy that reward element, while in others, monetary gain and tradable items that can be converted into GP fit the bill, and this one's a combination of both. The tradable items generally fall into a number of categories: alchables, supplies, uniques, or unique consumables. Generally speaking, we want to steer clear from adding too many alchables to loot tables, since it can be difficult to introduce gold sinks that make a meaningful enough dent in the amount of gold circulating in the game, and inflation is a concern for many players. That's very fair. Adding supplies lets players trade those supplies for GP, but it risks weakening the position of those supplies in the economy and also exasperating concerns about PVM outcompeting skilling too heavily for resource generation. Uniques are good, and we've had a handful of tradable uniques coming from the Fortis Colosseum, but it's difficult to predict their price long-term or rely on them for consistent GP, so they need to be supplemented with other drops. And the final category is unique consumables, things like Revenant Ether or Ancient Essence, which tend to be an appealing option since they're constantly being used up and being sold off without harming items that didn't exist before. In this case, that unique tradable consumable is Sunfire Dust, which we position as being used up by the Glaive, Sunfire Rune Creation, and the Quiver. For the unique consumables to hold a good value, they need to actually be consumed so that they're in demand. And the best way to do this is to make the things consuming them useful in a number of scenarios rather than being overly niche. Bro, Jagex is spitting facts in these last 3 paragraphs. The last 3 paragraphs I just read, you can make a whole video about this. They clearly have a good understanding of how drop tables will affect stuff. A lot of people do like to complain. I've definitely talked some shit about, like, a lot of bosses drop too many supplies. They've even mentioned in here, it's not always easy to balance, where you need bosses to drop some different variety of things. So sometimes supplies are a great way for bosses to be good GP an hour, but that straight up ruins any skilling method that grinds that supply for money. So that balance is not easy. So they got a couple more paragraphs on this note. In general, they're going to let us be able to corrupt the quiver so that you don't need to use as much Sunfire Dust. I'm going to skip over a little bit of this because I could talk about this topic for a while. I'm tempted to make a discussion video purely about the idea of, like, what makes up a drop table. So the too long didn't read. The quiver is going to be able to store 2 ammo types. It'll automatically use whichever ammo type you need to use. And then the quiver will remain chargeable, but you will be able to corrupt it for a permanently charged version in exchange for a bunch of dust. When it is charged or corrupted, arrows and bolts that are fired from the quiver will gain an additional +1 strength and 10 range accuracy on top of the 3 range strength and 18 accuracy already provided. These bonuses are unchanged from before, but they will only apply to ammo that is stored in the quiver itself, meaning the additional benefits cannot apply to weapons like the bowfer or the toxic blowpipe, though the uncharged stats are still best in slot for all scenarios. That is an interesting way to make the charged ranged weapons not even more overpowered, and it gives the quiver, like, good use in a reasonable place for it. When you're using arrows and bolts that would go in the quiver, you now get a bonus for it. All right, we are almost done with the rewards. Those are all the big ones. We could talk about them for a while, but we scrolled back down to the end of the blog here. Unlike the Fight Caves or the Inferno, where all of your rewards are tied up in the big fancy cape that you get at the end, the Fortis Colosseum will give you plenty of opportunities to cash out early and make a tidy profit. End of wave rewards may contain any of the tradable uniques, Sunfire Dust and other familiar items, all of which can be converted into GP. So you'll be able to cash out and get some rewards to make some money each run. The aim is to really drive home the risk versus reward element. Will you take a big pile of loot and gracefully drop out, or risk it all for the chance to wow the crowd and earn some glory? At the same time, we want new players to feel like they can give the content a go, even if they can't make it all the way to the final waves. Surviving even a few rounds is more than the average citizen of Fortis can hope for, and making the effort will earn their respect. In addition to the untradeable uniques, meeting certain glory thresholds will also unlock utilities all over Varlamore, a bank chest in a useful location, agility shortcuts, new emotes, or even unique quests that's on the table. Oh, it's interesting. There's more things that you can unlock from the glory. I really like the idea that the glory from this Coliseum is going to affect other gameplay in Varlamore. We hope this will incentivize lower level players to give the Coliseum a go and get their first taste of PVM content. The waves aren't just a bunch of new enemies to fight, they are a benchmark for you to measure yourself against every time that you enter the minigame. We hope to see players come back every few levels to see how they improved while picking up some neat rewards in the meanwhile. So it looks like they are definitely trying to balance this, so at any point in your account, you could mess around with the Fortis Colosseum. Very high-level accounts will be able to try to get to the end and get crazy rewards, while low-level accounts will still be able to do some of the early waves and get an idea where their account's at and still get some benefit from that around Varlamore. Honestly, this blog post is huge. There's a lot of stuff they're looking to add with the Fortis Colosseum. I think the glaive and the new backpack, rather the quiver, both look pretty cool. I do kind of like the idea of the new armors from the Sunfire runes. They're interesting, but the glaive and the quiver caught my eye a little bit more. And in general, I think the content is going to be a lot of fun to do. It really helps if you get fun content that does like give a lot of rewards. But in general, if you get a lot of good rewards and it's just a boring grind, like that also sucks. There needs to be a balance of it, but I'm very excited for how the content looks. The modifiers and just the overall, the wave-based content that is going to be a different run every time. I feel like you can spend a lot of time grinding out the Coliseum. While I'm recording this, they have not put out a vote for the Coliseum quite yet, but for right now, none of these things have actually been voted in. This is still just the idea on the table. Let me know how you feel about the potential Fortis Colosseum update. I think this looks really cool and very interesting content, and I'm very excited to see how the polls go. That is going to wrap up this video, everybody. If you've been enjoying the videos or just getting some useful information, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. I do stream on Twitch, which is hopefully linked on the screen and in the description. And I also have a Discord, which is linked in the description. Thanks again for watching, and best of luck on your Fortis Colosseum grinds.